They told you that you're burned out. And you accepted it immediately. Not because you were sure it was true, but because it felt relieving. Because it explained your exhaustion without demanding responsibility. Burnout sounds humane. It sounds modern. It suggests that something external finally overwhelmed you. That the pressure was unfair. That the world asked for more than you could reasonably give. And for a moment, that story lets you breathe. But comfort does not make a story true. It only makes it easier to live with. Because most people who believe they are burned out are not suffering from excess effort. They are suffering from avoided discipline. From a life lived without structure while demanding peace anyway. The body can endure long hours. The mind can tolerate pressure. What it cannot endure for long is contradiction. Waking up each day knowing what must be done, and choosing not to do it. That tension does not explode. It erodes. You don't collapse all at once. You fade. You wake up already tired. Not because yesterday was demanding, but because yesterday was unfinished. You carry decisions you never made. Conversations you postponed. Commitments you delayed because they felt uncomfortable. And that weight follows you into sleep. This is not burnout. This is the exhaustion of living out of alignment. There is a clean kind of tiredness that follows honest effort. The kind that allows rest to actually work. You lie down knowing you gave what you had. And the body restores itself. But there is another kind. A dull, persistent heaviness. A fatigue that sleep cannot touch. That fatigue comes from avoidance. From knowing you could act, and choosing delay instead. Avoidance feels harmless because it is quiet. It does not shout. It whispers. Tomorrow. Later. When things calm down. When you feel more motivated. When you're in a better headspace. But tomorrow keeps arriving unchanged. And every time it does, the pressure increases. Unfinished responsibilities do not disappear. They linger in the background of the mind, consuming attention, draining energy, creating noise. You try to rest, but the mind doesn't shut off. Because rest is meant to recover effort, not replace it. You cannot rest your way out of avoidance. Modern language makes this easier to ignore. It offers softer explanations. Kinder terms. Every discomfort becomes stress. Every resistance becomes a sign you need a break. Every challenge is labeled harmful. Self-care replaces self-command. Comfort replaces standards. But comfort without discipline does not heal you. It weakens you. A mind that retreats from resistance becomes fragile. A life built around avoiding discomfort slowly loses strength. The Stoics understood this clearly. They did not worship suffering. But they did not flee from it either. They knew that pain avoided multiplies. And pain confronted transforms. Avoidance feels merciful in the moment. But it is cruel over time. Every time you avoid what you know must be done, you damage your authority over yourself. You hear your own words. And you watch yourself disobey them. At first, it barely registers. But the mind keeps score. And slowly, it stops listening. This is how motivation dies. Not because desire disappears, but because credibility collapses. You cannot command a mind that no longer trusts you. So you begin to feel stuck, drained, unfocused. You call it burnout. But what you are feeling is the cost of broken promises. The erosion of self-trust. Discipline is not about punishment. It is about restoring order. Energy is not something you wait for. It is something you create through movement. The longer you hesitate, the heavier everything feels. The moment you act, the weight shifts. Discipline does not drain you. Indecision does. Every unresolved task becomes mental friction. Every open loop hums in the background. Structure removes that noise. When structure enters your life, the arguing stops. There is no internal debate. No endless questioning. You know what must be done. And you do it. This is why disciplined lives feel calm even when they are demanding. And undisciplined lives feel chaotic even when they are comfortable. Chaos hides failure. Order exposes it. That is why the mind resists structure so fiercely. Because structure shows you the truth. Exactly how you spend your time. Exactly what you avoid. Exactly where you fall short. And the ego hates mirrors. So it labels discipline as rigid. It calls standards toxic. It reframes consistency as oppression. But chaos is not freedom. It is avoidance disguised as choice. A disorganized life feels safe because nothing is clearly wrong. Nothing is clearly neglected. There are no rules to fail. You stay busy. You stay distracted. You stay overwhelmed. And you confuse motion with progress. But chaos is exhausting. Not because it demands too much effort, but because it demands constant decision-making. What should I do next? What matters most? What can wait? Every unanswered question drains energy. Order removes that burden. The Stoics did not design their lives to be exciting. They designed them to be stable. Stability creates endurance. Endurance creates strength. Fatigue is misunderstood because people only look at workload. They assume tiredness comes from doing too much. But more often, it comes from doing too little of what matters. There is a difference between being overworked and being misaligned. Rest solves one. Structure solves the other. You can rest for weeks and return just as tired if nothing changes. Because the problem was never your energy. It was your direction. Fatigue is information. Not weakness. It asks a simple question. Are your actions aligned with your values? When the answer is yes, fatigue feels clean. When the answer is no, fatigue feels heavy. Discipline removes waste. And waste is what exhausts you. This is where the illusion of burnout begins to crack. Once you understand that fatigue is not always a signal to stop, something changes in how you listen to yourself. You stop treating every feeling as an instruction. You stop assuming that discomfort is damage. You begin to recognize that much of what drains you is not effort, but disorder. A disordered life demands constant negotiation. Every hour becomes a decision. Every task becomes a debate. Should I do this now or later? Is this important or can it wait? Do I feel like doing this today? That internal bargaining never ends. And it quietly exhausts you. Order ends the argument. When your standards are clear, your mind stops fighting itself. There is no question about what must be done. Only execution. This is why structure feels restrictive to people who have lived without it. Because structure removes the illusion of choice. But most choices are not freedom. They are friction. The Stoics understood that freedom does not come from endless options. It comes from commitment. When your day has shape, your mind relaxes. When your priorities are defined, anxiety loses its grip. This is not theory. It is physiology. The nervous system calms when it can predict what comes next. Chaos keeps it alert, scanning for threats that never arrive. This is why people living in comfortable disorder still feel restless. Nothing is wrong, but nothing is resolved. They are surrounded by convenience, yet internally strained. Discipline resolves this strain. Not through force. Through clarity. Clarity is uncomfortable at first because it exposes avoidance. It shows you exactly where your energy leaks. It reveals how often you say later when you mean never. How often you lower standards to protect comfort. And when this becomes visible, the ego reacts. It tells you discipline is unnatural. That structure kills creativity. That consistency is boring. But this is not truth. It is resistance. Chaos feels creative because nothing is finished. Everything remains possible. But possibility without execution is not creativity. It is delay. Order feels limiting because it requires choice. And choice requires sacrifice. You cannot do everything. So you must decide what matters. This decision is where most people retreat. They would rather remain overwhelmed than be responsible. Because responsibility removes excuses. A life without structure always has an explanation. A life with structure only has results. This is why busyness has become a badge of honor. It hides inefficiency. It disguises avoidance. You say you are overwhelmed. But overwhelmed with what? With decisions you never made. With priorities you never set. Overwhelm is rarely about volume. It is about absence of order. The Stoics did not chase stimulation. They valued stability. Stability allows effort to compound. Instability resets you every day. When nothing is consistent, nothing accumulates. And constant restarting is exhausting. Discipline allows progress to stack. One day builds on the next. This is where self-trust begins to return. Self-trust is not built by believing in yourself. It is built by proving yourself reliable. Every small promise kept strengthens authority. Every unnecessary delay weakens it. You do not lose confidence all at once. You leak it. And you rebuild it the same way. Quietly. This is why discipline often feels unspectacular. There is no rush. No drama. Just repetition. But repetition is what reshapes identity. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who tries. You begin seeing yourself as someone who acts. This shift is subtle, but permanent. Emotion starts to change as a result, not a cause. When you act despite resistance, the resistance loses credibility. When you wait for emotion, it gains power. This is why emotion cannot lead. Emotions fluctuate. Standards endure. Emotional awareness matters. But emotional obedience destroys consistency. Maturity is not numbness. It is hierarchy. You feel fear, but fear does not decide. You feel resistance, but resistance does not command. Your principles do. Structure supports this maturity. When rules are clear, emotion has nothing to negotiate with. There is no argument. You do not ask how you feel about the task. You execute because it is aligned. This is where calm begins to appear. Not the calm of escape. The calm of order. An ordered life reduces mental noise. Completion quiets anxiety. You feel lighter not because life is easier, but because nothing is chasing you. Avoidance creates ghosts. Completion removes them. This is why procrastinated tasks feel heavy long before you begin them, and lighter the moment you start. The weight was never the work. It was the avoidance. Discipline exposes this illusion. It teaches you that most dread is imaginary. And most relief comes from action. This is where pressure changes meaning. Pressure without structure feels like attack. Pressure with structure feels like training. The Stoics did not fear pressure. They selected it. They understood that a chosen burden strengthens, while an imposed one breaks. When you choose responsibility, pressure becomes purposeful. It sharpens attention. It clarifies priorities. You stop asking how to escape pressure. You start asking how to carry it well. This shift is everything. You realize that removing pressure does not create peace. Direction does. This is why people who reduce responsibility often feel emptier, not calmer. They removed the weight, but lost the meaning. Meaning stabilizes the mind. When effort has purpose, fatigue becomes tolerable. When effort feels random, fatigue becomes unbearable. Discipline restores meaning by aligning action with values. You stop drifting. You stop negotiating. And slowly, something you haven't felt in a long time returns. Ground. Ground changes how you carry yourself. It changes how you interpret resistance. It changes how you experience pressure. When you are grounded, difficulty no longer feels personal. It feels expected. You stop asking why things feel hard. You start asking what must be done next. This is where most people realize something uncomfortable. They were not overwhelmed because life was too demanding. They were overwhelmed because they had no order. Order does not remove difficulty. It gives difficulty a place to stand. Without order, every challenge feels like an invasion. With order, challenges become part of the process. This is the difference between being attacked by life and training inside it. The Stoics lived inside this distinction. They did not expect calm without discipline. They did not expect peace without responsibility. They understood that the mind settles when it knows who is in charge. Most people feel anxious not because they are incapable, but because nothing inside them is clearly leading. Desire pulls one way. Fear pulls another. Comfort negotiates constantly. And the self sits in the middle, exhausted. Discipline ends the negotiation. It declares authority. Not loudly. Not emotionally. Decisively. This is why discipline feels uncomfortable at first. It interrupts familiar patterns. It removes the excuses you have been using to survive yourself. The mind resists because it senses loss. Loss of delay. Loss of ambiguity. Loss of the ability to hide. But what is lost is weakness. What remains is clarity. This clarity changes how you experience time. You stop feeling chased by the day. You stop feeling behind before you even start. Because when priorities are clear, time stops feeling hostile. You no longer try to do everything. You do what matters. And what does not matter stops asking for your energy. This is how discipline simplifies life. Not by reducing responsibility, but by eliminating noise. Noise is what drains you. Not effort. This is why people can work long hours towards something meaningful and still feel alive. And why people with light schedules can feel permanently exhausted. Energy follows alignment. When your actions match your values, the body cooperates. When they don't, the body protests. This is not weakness. It is feedback. The mistake is interpreting that feedback as a signal to retreat instead of a signal to reorganize. Burnout becomes the story when people retreat from feedback instead of responding to it. They treat fatigue as damage instead of instruction. But instruction only works if you are willing to lead. This brings us to the final illusion. Readiness. I'll start when I feel ready. When things slow down. When I'm in a better place. Readiness sounds responsible. But it is often fear with good vocabulary. You do not become ready before you act. You become ready because you act. Action creates clarity. Clarity creates confidence. Waiting does the opposite. Waiting does not preserve you. It reshapes you. Every day spent waiting reinforces the identity of someone who delays. An identity compounds faster than effort. The Stoics never waited for certainty. They waited for alignment. They acted because action was their responsibility, not because conditions were perfect. They understood that life does not reward hesitation. It responds to direction. Direction is what most people are missing. Not intelligence. Not opportunity. Direction. When direction is absent, pressure feels cruel. When direction is present, pressure feels meaningful. This is why pressure without purpose breaks people, and pressure with purpose builds them. Discipline gives pressure direction. It tells effort where to go. It tells energy how to move. This is why disciplined lives feel demanding but calm. And undisciplined lives feel chaotic but stagnant. Calm does not come from removing challenge. It comes from organizing it. Once you see this, the burnout narrative loses its grip. Because burnout depends on helplessness. On the belief that something external controls your state. Discipline returns agency. You realize you were never broken. You were unstructured. You asked for peace without order. Confidence without consistency. Relief without responsibility. Those things do not coexist. Peace is built. Confidence is earned. Relief follows alignment. The Stoics never promised comfort. They promised control. Control over reaction. Control over response. Control over self. In a world that reacts impulsively, they remain deliberate. Not passive. Not numb. Present. Accountable. Grounded. This is the calm they spoke of. Not the calm of escape, but the calm of completion. When nothing is avoided, nothing haunts you. You sleep better not because life is easy, but because life is honest. You know what must be done. And you trust yourself to do it. This trust is freedom. Not freedom from effort, but freedom from confusion. You no longer argue with yourself. You no longer dramatize resistance. You respond. This is what discipline ultimately gives you. Not a harder life. A quieter mind. Not more pressure. Clearer purpose. Not perfection. Reliability. And reliability is strength without noise. This is not punishment. This is self-respect. This is the Stoic response, where silence becomes strength, and calm is your rebellion.